Okay, great. It's Neil. It's great to see you again. We were talking on the phone the other day about some red pill thinking. I thought it'd be a great idea to come and do a video after old CFTV days. A sort of nostalgia trip.
Exactly, Mo. It's brilliant to see you too, obviously. And we did have a riot in those days. We didn't make any money out of it, but we certainly had some fun at CFTV. I wanted to do a video that was really talking about this red pill movement. People waking up and realising that kind of leftist ideology has kind of pervaded into our society in the West in a way that could be really, really damaging, and people are waking up. People are doing it. It's nothing to do with me, but they're waking up and saying, I've taken the red pill. I've realised, and there's some slight bits in it that kind of trouble me, and I think maybe that making a video, given our experience, I could potentially help. So really, I guess the thing that troubles me is the Matrix analogy, and in the Matrix analogy, it's the idea is you take the red pill, you wake up and you realise the world isn't what you thought the world was. So you thought that the overwhelming narrative in society at the moment is that if you're a good person, you're left wing, and if you're a bad person, you're right wing, and anything increasingly right of really strict leftist ideology and strict political correctness is right wing, and uber right wing, and they're waking up and it's kind of like the Matrix, and they're realising that that we now live in a society where this kind of leftist groupthink, it controls the universities, it controls Hollywood completely, it controls the mainstream media completely, increasingly is just kind of pervasive in the civil service, certainly in the UK, and I think probably in America as well. So people are kind of sat there going, oh my God, I am actually on the Nebuchadnezzar, and the narrative that people use, and this is, I guess, the thing that I find a little bit problematic and a little bit potentially untrue, is that we lost the culture war. So people say, we lost the culture war, we've got to regain this territory. And I guess the point of my video is really twofold. One is, I don't believe we did lose the culture war. I think there wasn't a culture war. And I want to talk briefly about the reasons for that. But I think the distinction is really important, that we didn't lose the culture war, there was no culture war. And the second one is that I want to launch a site that maybe hopefully will be a bit more helpful to people than CFTV ended up being to people. It completely lost that mission, but basically giving people the opportunity in a similar way that we did people phoning up and talking about their private equity or site, just normal people who used to be leftists and woke up and realised, and then we'd shoot Skype videos and just broadcast them so that people can see this movement, and it can be kind of helpful as a library to people. So that's kind of broadly the purpose.
Okay, so maybe there wasn't a culture war. Maybe that was just semantics. But what does that matter?
Yeah. What? Okay. So why does it matter? It matters because of three things. Well, no, because of one thing really. But motivation. People's motivation. You can break down. We know this from our days before, into three parts, right? To fully motivate somebody to actually do something and to achieve something, they need carrot, they need stick, and they need belief. So if people are waking up and taking the red pill and they're saying, right, we need to take this territory back, we need to regain the narrative in society, to more kind of not so much right thinking as in right left, as in right thinking as in right wrong, just personal responsibility and all that kind of stuff. Then it's obvious to see the carrot. I mean, the carrot. I'm as you know, because we've known each other for a long time. I'm a person of 22 years. Sober, recovered alcoholic, and I see, therefore, when I work with people and in my own life, when people wake up and start taking personal responsibility and what Jordan Peterson, I guess, would describe as tidying your own room, the spreading effect in your life is dramatic and it's amazing. And once people take the red pill and they realise that actually personal responsibility is where it's at, they realise that the better society we could be. I don't believe in utopias, but the better, incrementally better society that we could have, and dramatically so. So the carrot's there. The stick's also there, Because when you've got universities that are saying we need to tear down Western civilization, and Western civilization is literally the pinnacle of where anybody, you know, whether you're black, white, brown, yellow, you know, transgender, cisgender, you know, gay, straight, whatever you are as a human being, and probably as an animal for that matter, living in the current incarnation of the West, in mankind, is the best place, and it's not close, right? So when you've got universities who are sat there saying, well, we need to tear down the patriarchy, we need to, you know, all this stuff, you know, it's very, we live in a society that is probably more precarious than we think, and we need to protect that. So the stick's there as well. But, and this is the point, if you take the Matrix analogy and you stretch that and you say, okay, fine, so I've taken the red pill and I've woken up and I've realised that I was in the Matrix, the leftist Matrix, and I've woken up and the world's different. Where does that then go? Well, okay, so I'm on the Nebuchadnezzar, right, with Morpheus, and I'm wearing rags and I'm eating cat vomit, you know, it's not a great picture. And you look around and you go, oh my God, the machines own everything, right? Literally, the sky's been burned and the thing, right? And you can take that analogy and you can apply that potentially. And I think this is where the "we lost the culture war" thing goes awry a bit, because you just kind of wake up and think, oh, well, maybe I am on the Nebuchadnezzar, and we, you know, they own Hollywood and they own the media and they own the universities, and, you know, and oh, we can't get speakers onto university campuses, and the narrative is not telling people about the violence of Antifa and blah 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 blah. And I've got to be honest, if I was in the film The Matrix and I woke up and I was in that thing wearing rags, eating cat vomit and waiting for a Keanu Reeves lookalike Messiah to save me, I'd take the red pill and then I'd take a shed load of other pills. I'd be gone, I'd be out, I'd be like, no, sod that, you know, I'd just take a load of stuff and die. You know, so it's that belief that we can do it. And so the analogy I like a lot more is, and this is where I think we are, when people take the red pill and we wake up, it's much more like the midpoint of World War II, when the Axis powers, they owned Europe, they owned Africa, they owned the Middle East, Far East, and they owned the Pacific Rim, but America hadn't come into the war, and then they overstepped by bombing Pearl Harbour, and suddenly the sleeping giant that was America woke up and went, hello, what's going on here? And they owned all of the territory, but America had not lost a single battle against the Axis powers at this point. And what happened was they teamed up with the Allies and they geared up, and then we kind of, the tide of the war changed, you know, and I guess that's more the analogy. And that's what I see, and I listen to stories, and certainly the website, the channel that I want to set up, I want it to be that red pill moment, but the Pearl Harbour red pill. When did the leftists overstep in the same way that the Axis powers overstepped and just went, whoa, and you woke up with your brain and said, oh, right, this is too much, this is too much. And I think the point is, really, and the reason that I don't think it's a semantic distinction, is that we can win, and the reason that we can win is because none of the arguments have been had. I mean, that's not the only reason we can win, right? The other reason we can win is that we've got intellectual titans like Jordan Peterson in the intellectual dark web, who are sat here saying, I don't want this, you know, I don't want this leftist groupthink, I don't want it, and actually, you know, you've got people like Ben Shapiro going out there talking about facts and addressing things, and Candace Owens and people like this, all out there. These people are really smart people, and they're really good, and they've got really good ideas, and they've got really good logic. And what are they up against? They're up against cultural appropriation. Can't go to a fancy dress party dressed as a samurai because it's cultural appropriation. Well, I was reading Shogun when I was 15, I absolutely enjoyed it. What happened to imitation is the greatest form of praise? You know, there's just arguments like this, they're rife with them. The patriarchy, you know, white privilege, all this kind of stuff is just, it just doesn't bear, you know, the fact that we live the narrative that they create, that we live in a really oppressive society when it's the freest that mankind's ever been, you know. So I think, you know, I think it's important to know that we're about to win a battle.
So we had a bit of a technology fail there. acquired a dog as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The cameras decided to switch themselves off, and then Pepper decided that she's. Also, I wanted to dispel any rumour that if people do decide that I'm really right wing, that right wing people are evil because we have dogs. So it's fine. I'm not that right wing actually, but anyway, there you go.
So how did we get here? I mean, how did we not win the culture war?
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah. So why do people think that? I guess why do people think there was a culture war when there wasn't, and what happened? How did they get all of this territory? Well, I think from my perspective, and again, I don't have any of the learnedness of sort of Peterson and people like that, but observing, what I've seen happen and what in my lifetime, what it seems that happened is that in the kind of in the 60s and 70s, because I was born in the 70s, but. And then into the 80s, socialism was given a really good airing, if you like, and also communism was given a pretty good try as well in the 20th century, and of course the result of that was dramatically bad, for everybody involved. So communism obviously, is well documented, killed over 100 million people, led to poverty on a scale that hasn't been seen since the Dark Ages. It was just dramatic fail on every level, morally, politically, and particularly economically. Socialism was tried, certainly in the UK, which is where I guess we know most. Obviously I know I'm a bit older than you. I remember my mum going shopping and having to buy candles every time she went shopping, because there was a really good chance that every time in between shops we were going to have a power cut, and the idea of not having candles in your cupboard was appalling. In the same way that the idea of having candles now that aren't scented or for some sort of bathroom playtime, right, is odd, So because we had rolling power cuts all the time, and in the winter of discontent we had rubbish piled in the streets, and there's a lot of furore at the moment about Brexit. Well, Brexit wasn't an issue in the 1970s under socialism because Europe didn't want us in, because we were the sick man of Europe and economically bereft. So all of this happened, and we got to a situation where economically speaking, but also politically and socially and morally, the whole ideas of the far left were completely bankrupt. There were only people like Jeremy Corbyn who carried on believing. It's crazy. Lunatics just carried on, like complete ideologues, because the mainstream narrative was just like, this just failed. Even Carry On movies were being made with Carry On at your convenience, which just they were mocking it. Monty Python were mocking it in Life of Brian. The whole thing was just laughable, right? And so socialism was kind of dead in the water, and what this meant was that traditional liberals, conservatives, libertarians became incredibly lazy, because they realised that they could win elections purely by making the economic argument, and people became obsessed with the economic argument. Tax and spend won't work. In 1992 in the UK. John Major, the least charismatic Prime Minister ever to ever be anywhere, right, won an election pretty much purely off the back of one poster, which basically said there's a big bomb of taxes that Labour are going to bring, and everybody's like, oh yeah, Labour, yeah, they'll tax and spend, this will be a disaster, and he won a whole election based on it. So the right, for want of a better description, could realise they could win politically. They could win the argument, and of course in the UK the only I guess slight anomaly from that was when Tony Blair decided to come out as what I would describe as not so much a wolf in sheep's clothing as a wolf in wolf's clothing with an I'm a sheep honest badge on him, saying, well, actually I'll look after the economy, and he persuaded the city and he persuaded everybody, and of course we all know what happened. So basically the right decided that they could win the debate, politically speaking, just using the economic argument, and the moral argument went out the window. And the moral argument, of course, it was classical liberals as well who used to use the moral argument for what I would describe as personal responsibility. John F. Kennedy came out and very famously said, think not what your country can do for you, think what you can do for your country. Well, the left don't say that anymore, do they? They absolutely think what the state can do for you, and don't bloody think about what you can do for anybody else. But that kind of classic liberal thinking, which is the kind of stuff that that I'm really passionate about just went out the window. We just stopped making the moral argument. So what happened was, and also, you know, socialism became a bit of a laughing stock for a period of time. Enough time that people crept into the universities and then they started spouting all this stuff, and everybody just kind of, I think, just laughed at them. It was like, oh, they're just crazy, you know, who cares, right? And it was just complacency, and then that just crept in over a period of time, and of course politicians kept winning elections or doing okay, and that battlefield, they just I think now we're 2 generations into having no, you know, right of extreme left politicians who can make the moral argument. And the ironic thing is that the moral argument for personal responsibility is... Let me explain briefly what I mean by that. So, for example, Ben Shapiro, who is a great hero of mine and I think is a very clever, very clever guy, makes the economic argument for you know, I guess, right of centre extremely well. Right? And one of the things he talks about is there are only 3 things that you need to do in the West to not be permanently poor. Right? You need to finish high school, you need to get a job, and you need to not get married. You need to get married before you have kids. Right? And he's right about that. I have no problem with that. That's absolutely right. And there's a 90+ correlation between doing that and not being permanently poor. But it's still the economic argument, right? So the argument I would make, which comes much, I guess, a bit more from a spiritual side, but also from a moral side, is if you do those things, which is basically taking responsibility for your life. So if you take responsibility for your life and do what Peterson describes, I guess, as shouldering the biggest burden you can imagine, or, you know, growing up, tidying your room, going out and doing that stuff. If you take personal responsibility, you will be a happier, more rounded, and you and I know this from the time we've spent together, you will be a better person regardless of whether you're richer or not. Oh, but by the way, 90% chance you'll be richer. You know? And it should be in that order. The order should be, the world will be a better place. I mean, the kind of philosophy that I follow is, you know, my purpose in life is to fit myself to be of maximum usefulness to God and the people around me, right? And that is the correct way of thinking about the world. You know, thinking about what you can give to other people, not what you can get from other people. But this moral argument's been lost, and that's where it went. So it was more. There wasn't a culture war. It was just complete complacency after a massive victory, I think, is the summary.
Before we started shooting, you said we don't need to change a lot of people's minds. Do you want to kind of expand on that?
Well, yeah. I mean, this is a theory of mine over time. You see, the pervasive narrative in the West at the moment is the 2 great lies. Is the first one being that if you are right wing, then you're bad, and if you're left wing, you're good, right? Which is kind of the only real decent argument for why Hitler was right wing, apparently. None of his policies were, but apparently being a racist is now right wing. So, you know, there's this pervasive lie that being right wing is bad and being left wing is good. So everybody wants to think of themselves as a good person. Everybody's a hero of their own story, right? So they all want, you know, so there's a massive pull to be left wing. The second lie is that the way to help people who are in pain is to take away the immediate symptoms of their pain, not tell them the truth and help them grow out of their pain and learn from it, right? And these are both really, really bad lies, right? Now, the interesting thing is there are loads of people in society, loads of people I meet. Like, I had a conversation with a friend of mine the other day, and this probably won't colour me in a particularly good light, but basically they said to me that I was saying something about socialism, and they said, well, don't say that to my husband because he's a socialist. And I said, I'll bet you £1 million he isn't. Because I know him, right, and he's all about personal responsibility, but I think people are sold on this idea that if you want to virtue signal being, even if you're not a virtue signaller, if you just want to be a good person, you have to be left wing, right? And it all becomes a little bit complex, but then you scratch it. Let me give you an example. Russell Brand, who is a guy I have a huge amount of respect for. I think Russell Brand is a person out in the world who is doing one of the really important things. I think it's much more important to ask the right questions, you know, because we used to work together, and I'd always say about businesses that we were consulting with and working with, you know, that 90% of the battle is asking the right question, right? Russell Brand is out there asking the right questions, I think, and I have a huge amount of respect for that. Also have a lot of respect for him. He's a long-term, clean and sober person, as am I, right? And also, I have a very strong suspicion, having never met the man, that the cornerstone of the foundation of our beliefs, spiritual beliefs and lives are very similar, right? That said, Russell Brand thinks he's left-wing, right? And I'm perfectly happy to have a chat with him about this. It won't be on Twitter, because I usually know I'm not on Twitter. Very happy to have a chat with him about it. I do not think he has a left-wing bone in his body at all. And in fact, actually, it's quite interesting to watch, when I watch his videos and watch some of the really good stuff he's doing, him slowly wake up to the fact that actually he's right-wing. But the problem is that he's been sold on this lie that if he wants to be good, especially in the background that he grew up in, then he can't be right-wing, he has to be left-wing. But what does he believe in? He believes in personal responsibility. You know, as somebody in recovery and somebody who's trying to help other recovered people, he knows that people, you can't help somebody until they have their rock bottom and decide that they want to change, and therefore stealing somebody's rock bottom from them, i.e. alleviating the symptoms of their short-term pain, is probably the biggest crime you could possibly commit against, let's say, an addict. But why are addicts special against anybody? If people are in the world making really bad decisions and doing really bad things, and you just take a little bit of short-term pain away, all you do is enable them to carry on making good decisions. You should speak to them and tell them the truth. And I think so. Actually, what we need to do is change the narrative and make people realise, A, it's a complete lie, and it's a really, really weird lie to think that left is good and right is bad. Right? There are good people all over the place and horrible people all over the place. And I think then also people waking up and thinking, wait a second, well, if this debate really is about, I guess, libertarianism or individualism against, not individualism's wrong, but personal responsibility against totalitarian, kind of fascist, you know, leftist ideology that led to 100 million deaths in the 20th century, then I'm definitely on this side of the debate. So I think it's true that, and again, don't we call me Captain Semantic? It might seem semantic to say that we don't need to change people's minds. All we need to do is change people's minds about this. What we don't need to do is persuade them about personal responsibility. They already believe in that. We just need to make them realise that means they can't be a leftist.
So what do you think we do next?
Well, I think people like Jordan Peterson have the absolute right idea on this. You know, we need to tell the truth. You know, we need to go out there, we need to tell the truth. We need to be open to the kind of birth, death and renewal, you know, having conversations, listening to ideas. I mean, one of the things about me, so you'll remember this, it was a couple of years ago that we worked together, and if you ever managed to listen to me when I was talking to you, then you'll know that my philosophy was very much about we should all be happy and everything should be fun and we should be searching for fun. And then I listened to a video on the BBC, or sort of a podcast on the BBC actually, with Jordan Peterson, basically just completely slated that. And I was, at this time, I'm driving Matthew to the hospital, right, some trivial thing, I can't remember what, and I'm in the car listening to this podcast, and Jordan Peterson, who I have a huge amount of respect for, basically comes out the central tenet of my belief system and says, "You're a complete mug if you think this." To which I sit there and go, "Oh my God, right, somebody that I really respect has," but actually I think you should do it with people who you don't respect necessarily, not respect. And he says, "Look, this is just infantile. You know, it's stupid. It should be about meaning and, you know, shouldering burden." And suddenly, I then went into a few days of watching a few more of his videos and trying to mould this as an idea in my head and thinking, you know, wow, this is yeah, wow, actually. And so I rewrote a load of stuff, and one of the things he talks about is birth, death and renewal, and that's what happened to me in that example. It's just that suddenly I'm going around to people, and actually one of my jokes, you remember, was always, I reserve the right to change every single opinion I espouse today, at whim, and I did that. So I'd be going out to people, particularly my kids, and go, you know, I've been telling you that it's all about being happy. Well, that's nonsense, actually, I've decided. But I think we need to remain willing for that growth and learning. So we need to go out and we need to speak the truth, and we need to listen to other potential truth, and we need to keep growing and keep learning, and all of that stuff. And the other thing is, I think we need to start making the moral argument alongside the economic argument. So again, you know, and I can't caveat this too strongly in terms of my respect for Ben Shapiro. And I'm not picking on him because I think he makes the economic argument fantastically well. But when he comes out and says things like facts, you know, facts don't care about feelings, I get what he means. You know, and I get in the hysterical age of the left shutting down debate with histrionics and hyperbole and just nonsense, and it's needed. It's a message that's needed to be heard. But what I would add to that is I do care about feelings, and I think we've known each other for long enough for you to know that this is true. I do care about feelings. I do care about people's feelings very deeply, but on a long-term basis. And I think that another lie that people are being told is that if you're angry or frightened today, what you need to do is do something to alleviate that anger and fear right now. And what you need to do is go and change the immediate world that you're in. And my belief system isn't that at all. I think what you need to do, what I don't think anybody needs to do at all, but what I do is, if I'm frightened of something, I think, is this something I really need to address? And therefore I need to probably change my view of the world and change my actions in the world so that I can grow into this and overcome it. And when I'm angry with somebody, it's more often than not because I'm behaving wrong in the world, not because they're behaving wrong in the world. So either my expectations are wrong, or either my expectations are wrong or my actions are wrong, or probably both. And I need to sit down, I need to think about it, and I need to change my view of the world and change my actions. And I think that's, but you know, that's where that's you know, that's another debate we can have, rather than having this. You know, if you have a conservative or a classic liberal or whatever it is, right of leftist view, then we just care about facts, we don't care about feelings. Well, we do care about facts, but actually I think what we need to shift that debate is that your feelings aren't. A very wise man once said to me, feelings are real and must be experienced but have little or nothing to do with reality. And this is true. Our feelings are real and they are telling us something, and I believe those messages are really valuable, but they're telling us messages about what we need to change in ourselves, not what we need to change in other people. So if I'm offended by something, I need to look at me, not you. You know, and I think shifting that debate and saying, actually, because if we have that conversation properly, then ultimately people will be happier and better, and those things will go away. Like, if my children get offended by something, I don't go and change the whole world and go and, you know, I think one of the analogies, I haven't used this for a while, one of the analogies I used to use in parenting, because I think parenting in my generation was just really subpar. And I'm, by the way, not claiming to be perfect. Definitely made a lot of errors. But people parented a lot more. You know, if you imagine yourself coaching a junior rugby team, you know, your job as a coach of a junior rugby team is to give them a bit of advice on the sideline, give them a bit of coaching, throw them a few drills, show them how to pass a ball, and then stand on the sideline and maybe shout a bit of advice while they play rugby. And given that, you know, I'm 6 foot and 14 stone and the little kids are 2 foot and 3 stone, I don't know what, you know, the idea of me running onto the rugby pitch and trying to get involved in the game is bloody stupid, because they're not going to learn anything, and it's just really a bit weird. And I think there's a lot of parenting in my generation that has led to these kids where they've been playing junior rugby as an analogy, and the parents have just run onto the pitch and started smacking parents, other kids. It's just chaos, you know, and it's very much preparing the road for your children rather than preparing your children for the road. And I think, you know, we need to have a much more honest debate about that. and about the fact that we're not doing our kids any favours, you know, because, and I've always, you know, and I always thought, you know, as I was growing up, and I always was very conscious that every time I got in my car I might die in a car crash, and every time my wife got in a car she might die in a car crash, and every time we got in a car together we might die in a car crash. Not that I'm particularly phobic about cars, but you get my point. So I need to do everything I can today to prepare my kids to be able to live without me. You know, I need to have the conversations I need to have, and if not now, when, you know. And I think, well, anyway, I think we, you know, we need to have that honest debate, and I think if we can do that, if we can be honest with people, and if we can start making the moral argument again, then I think we're going to be fine.
So what can people do if they want to make a Pearl Harbour red pill video? Right,
okay, so the idea behind this is very much like what we used to do. I'm sure there's maybe videos still on YouTube as a residual of CFTV where we'd you know, contact private equity house, we'd run a deal and we'd interview them on split screen on Skype and record them. And this is very much the concept for these videos. I want people to be able to share and communicate that idea. So somebody who was a momentum activist and suddenly woke up and realised that what, you know, I've personally got friends who used to be, you know, union activists in the kind of 80s and 90s and have woken up and just gone, oh my God, this is just so. But just normal people, you know, normal people. If you're a political activist or you're a normal person, I'm myself included, I don't know. But normal people just coming up. So I guess what they could do is there's contact details in the comment section underneath. If they just kind of reach out on that, and you know, we'll get in contact. Set up a Skype call, similar in the early days. Have that Skype conversation. Listen to their story. If there needs to be a bit of an edit or a bit of a cut around with it, then get their permission on that, and then put it up on YouTube. You know, and the thing that I think could be useful about it is I think, you know, there's strength in numbers and there's hope in numbers as well. And I think if people take the red pill, I've never taken the red pill because I was never swayed remotely by socialism or leftism. I'd imagine it's pretty lonely. You know, and I see these and I hear the stories, and you know, they've basically, a lot of their friends have turned against them, and I think having that solidarity and having that feeling that they're not alone and how that feels like, I just, you know, have this vision of a kind of honest, you know, 10-15 minute videos of just listening to people and their stories, and I think it'd be fascinating, and I think it'd be really helpful to people, you know. So the answer to your question is, you know, get in touch, contact details below. You want a video, we'll get in touch, we'll make the video, we'll get it up on YouTube.
Brilliant, excellent, thanks Neil.
Well, thanks Mo, thanks for coming back and having a bit of a foray into our past life and video.